In this video, we will demonstrate the following basic and advanced techniques of looming. Threading the loom, working the ring, changing colors, making the band of a cap, making the crown of a cap, creating a pom-pom, looming flat pieces, the quick method of looming, creating baby booties, slippers, socks, and scarves. This video will also give information about how to donate to humanitarian aid and charities, and also how to order additional looms. Let's begin with the basics. To start, tie a slip knot around the thumbtack and back through the pegs immediately behind the tack. The peg with the black top is peg number 1. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise around peg number 1, then do the same to peg number 2 and on clockwise around the ring until each peg has one wrap of yarn on it. Push the yarn wrap down the peg so you will have room to put another loop on each peg. Wrap peg number 1 counterclockwise again with a loop of yarn and repeat the looping all the way around the ring. Repeat this operation again until you have 3 loops of yarn on each peg. Wrap the working yarn around the tack so it will hold the tension on the yarn. Place the pick under the bottom yarn loop of peg number 1 and pull it up over the top of the peg, leaving 2 loops on the peg. Do this process to each peg until you are back to peg number 1. You have now completed 1 row. Remove the working yarn off of the tack and wrap the pegs with 1 wrap. You will again have 3 loops on each peg. Wrap the working yarn around the tack again and use your pick to pull the bottom loop over the top of the pegs. After you have completed 6 rows, remove the starting yarn from the tack and pull it through to the inside of the ring and let it hang loose. Continue wrapping and picking until you have completed 60 rows. If you wish to change colors of yarn, unwrap the working yarn from the tack after completing the picking operation. This leaves 2 wraps on the pegs. Cut the working yarn, leaving an end about 2.5 inches long. Tie your new color yarn to this end in a square knot. Pull it back through to the inside of the ring and wind the yarn as before. On the 60th row, leave only 2 loops on each peg. Reach inside the hat and pull the first row up through the ring. Hook the first loop over peg number 1 using the starting yarn end that is hanging loose to line the first loop with peg number 1 and work around the ring until all of the first loops have been reattached to the pegs. This doubles the thickness of the cap band for greater warmth over the ears and forehead. This will result with 3 loops on each peg, and you are now ready to pull the bottom loop over the top of the peg as you have done before. Continue pulling the bottom loop over the top of the peg as before until you have completed 20 more rows, or 25 for adult hats. When you have completed the 20th or 25th row, leave only 1 loop on each peg. Cut a piece of matching yarn 18 inches long and thread both ends through a yarn needle. Starting with peg number 1, thread the needle through the remaining yarn loop and pull it off the peg. Continue this process with each peg all around the ring until all of the last loops are threaded onto the yarn with the needle attached. Unthread the needle from the yarn and pull the ends of the drawstring to the inside of the hat and cinch the cap up. After tying a square knot, snip the yarn ends off and your cap is completed unless you prefer a pom-pom. Wrap a contrasting color yarn around a 3-inch piece of cardboard until you have about 75 wraps. Now take a short piece of matching yarn and push it under each of the flat sides of the cardboard and tie half a square knot and cinch up the middle of the yarn tight. Hold it tight, tie the second half of the square knot. Repeat this process on the other flat side of the cardboard. Cut the yarn along the edge of the cardboard on each side. This gives you 2 bows of yarn cinched up in the middle. Take a short piece of matching yarn and push it through the top of the cap. Lay them on the top of the hat and tie them securely in place with the yarn you cinched the top of the hat with. Fluff the short strands of the yarn for a nice fluffy pom-pom. Flat pieces can be made by winding the working yarn around the pegs of the loom as normal until you get to the last peg. After winding the next to the last peg, reverse your winding direction on each peg and continue winding each peg clockwise as you work your way back to peg number 1. Repeat this process until you have 3 loops of yarn on each peg. Now you are ready to use your pick in the normal fashion. Use 2 strands of yarn together instead of 1. Follow the same procedure as before, but only wrap 2 double strands of yarn on each peg instead of 3. Using your pick, pull the bottom double strand over the peg, leaving only 1 double strand. Continue this procedure as before. Using the 15 peg loom and regular 4-ply, Baby Sport or Red Heart TLC yarn, knit 1 yarn over 2. If you choose to use baby yarn, wrap 2 strands together, treating it as if it were 1 yarn. To begin, you will be wrapping 3 rows on the loom. Knit 15 rows for a rolled cuff or 20 rows for a folded cuff and knit off. If making a folded cuff, knit 5 more rows before starting the heel. To make the heel, wrap pegs 1 through 10 and knit off. Next, wrap pegs 9 through 2 counterclockwise and knit off. Next row, wrap pegs 3 through 8 clockwise and knit off. Next, wrap pegs 7 through 4 counterclockwise and knit off. Next, wrap pegs 5 through 6 clockwise and knit off. Wrap pegs 6 through 5 counterclockwise and knit off. Next row, wrap pegs 4 through 7 clockwise and knit off. Next, wrap pegs 8 through 3 counterclockwise and knit off. The next row, wrap pegs 2 through 9 clockwise and knit off. Wrap pegs 10 through 1 counterclockwise and knit off. You have now completed the heel. To finish off the booty, knit 18 more rows. Take it off the loom onto a yarn needle in the regular fashion. Tie with a square knot on the inside of the booty. Crochet a chain 12 to 14 inches long. Weave it in and out of the booty 12 rows down for a tie, or use a ribbon for this purpose. Wrap 2 yarns together on the 15 peg loom. Do not close the circle. This part of the slipper will be a flat piece. Reverse wind around the pegs back to the beginning peg. You now have 4 strands of yarn on each peg. Begin knitting by pulling the bottom 2 yarns over the top 2 yarns and over the top of the peg. Reverse directions and wind 2 more strands together on each peg. Knit 15 rows of double yarns, keeping 1 space open. You have now completed the flat part of the slipper and are ready to knit the full circle of the loom. Wrap and knit off 8 rows of double yarns using the full circle of the loom. This completes the toe portion of the slipper. To make a larger slipper, more rows can be added to the flat part, 15 rows, or the circle part, 8 rows. Finish the slipper as you do a cap by taking the last row of loops off the loom with a yarn needle and a piece of matching yarn. Using the two ends of the yarn, make a drawstring and secure it tightly with a square knot. Whip stitch the back of the heel together with a piece of matching yarn. Add a small pom-pom to the front of the slipper if desired. The method of making adult slippers is the same as the child slippers, except the number of rows knit and you are using an 18 or 21 peg loom. The flat part can be about 25 rows and the closed portion about 10 rows. These numbers can be varied according to the size of the foot you are covering. Adult socks can be made on either the 18 or 21 peg loom. Use the quick method of looming and knit 20 rows. Then fold up for a cuff and knit together as you would for a cap band. Now using the main color, knit 10 more rows. However, only use one strand of yarn instead of two and wrap each peg 3 times before picking. You're now ready to begin the heel. With a contrasting color, start wrapping until you have wrapped 10 pegs, knit off. Wrap the same 10 pegs in the opposite direction and knit off. Decrease 1 stitch on each end by wrapping 4 pegs on each side of the tack, 8 pegs total. Then knit off. Wrap the same 8 pegs the opposite direction and knit off. Repeat the same steps, decreasing 1 on each end until you are down to 2 pegs. Wrap and knit off the 2 pegs in both directions. You are now ready to increase. Wrap 4 pegs and knit off. Reverse your direction and knit off the same 4 pegs. Increase to 6 pegs and knit off. Repeat until you are back to the 10 pegs and have knitted them off twice. Cut off the contrasting color, leaving a 4-inch tail. Now you are ready to work on the foot of the sock. Anchor your main color on the tack and knit 25 to 35 more rows. This is where you will adjust the length to fit the foot. Take the sock off the loom onto a yarn needle in the regular fashion. Tie with a square knot on the inside of the sock. When making a tube scarf, put 2 wraps on each peg and pull 1 over 1. Continue this process until you have reached the desired length. For reference, a 31 peg loom will create a scarf about 6 inches wide. Once you have taken the scarf off the loom, you can put fringe on the ends. For each fringe, take 12-inch strands of yarn and push them through the ends using a knot to tie them together. Using the techniques learned on this video, you can also create afghans, hand puppets, pot holders, and more.